morning. I'm Susan Eisenhower, and welcome to our fourth in a series of leadership lessons. I'm absolutely delighted to be with General Flora Darpino today. We're going to have a wonderful discussion about her leadership and what she has accomplished in her remarkable career. Before I make that introduction, however, I'd like to remind everybody on this call to be sure to put your questions into the question box. I don't know, maybe it's called a chat box here. Lauren Cole, who's with the Eisenhower Institute, will be just monitoring those questions so that we can be sure to give attention to first come, first serve. And then I'm going to ask you, after she calls on you, to unmute your device and to also put the video on, because I think it'd be wonderful if you could ask General Darpino the questions directly. And so let me say again what a pleasure it is to have you, General Darpino, here to this gathering. And I have to say what a remarkable career you've had. General Darpino is on the Gettysburg College Board of Trustees. And like many of her colleagues there, she's had a very distinctive career and has been the first at a number of things, which we will discuss. But General Darpino graduated from Gettysburg College in 1983 and received her law degree from Rutgers University in 1986. She has an LLM in military law from the Judge Advocates General School. This is part of the United States Army, and she served at the as an Army War College Fellow at the Department of Justice. In any case, it's important to know that General Darpino retired as an Army general officer and a military lawyer, where she was appointed as TJAG in 2013, and she fulfilled that role until 2017, where she was responsible for the Army Judge Advocate General's Corps. She was the first woman appointed to that position since its creation, get this folks, in 1775. She was also the senior military legal advisor to both the Secretary of the Army and the Chief of Staff of the Army. It's an extraordinary accomplishment. And she has so much more to her career than simply rising to the top. She played roles in Iraq and other places where our troops were deployed. And her military awards and decorations include the Distinguished Service Medal, the Defense Superior Service Medal, the Bronze Star Medal, the Legion of Merit, and the Meritorious Service Medal. What a pleasure it is to have you with us today, General Darpino. And I think for many of the people on this call, including myself, I would like to know much more about the role the Army legal community plays in the conduct of the United States Army. We're reading now in the newspaper some very complex issues have emerged about deployments that are in the Capitol at the moment, for instance. And what is intriguing but also difficult to figure out is what the legal standing of each of those organizations or those forces are. But in a much larger sense, I think few people really realize the extraordinary importance of the legal community within the military for a whole range of issues. So I was wondering if you could give us kind of an overview from your perspective.
Yes. Oh, that what a pleasure it is to be here. I really my time at Gettysburg definitely was something that made me who I am today. And so for the students that were, kind enough to join us here this morning, you don't recognize it as much at the time, but as you look back in your life, you will realize that the person you have become is very much based upon Gettysburg College. And that was true for me, and it really helped me through my career as an Army lawyer. Because what we do in the military as lawyers, it isn't the same as a civilian, where you get out and you become a corporate lawyer and you continue on that path and you work at your desk and you review contracts and you work your way up to partner as you bring in clients. That's not what we do. We, from the moment we come in, we know that we are a dual professional. We are required to be experts in the field of law, but we also are required to be experts and professional soldiers. And so we must be able to do both. I have to take the exact same physical fitness test. I have to take the exact same combat tests. There's no exception. As a lawyer, I am also a soldier. And why that's important is because what we do in the military runs the gamut of everything from what a general practitioner would do, which is, helping a soldier who's deployed, who gets a Dear John letter. And suddenly he's in a combat environment and he's facing a divorce case at home. We advise them when it comes to that. 2, on the battlefield, sitting in what is called, a tactical operation command, a TOC, helping commanders decide if firing a weapon into an area where there are civilians is a lawful fire. Is it a lawful target? So we are across the battlefield, but we're also doing things like contracts. We're reviewing those for the Army. We're doing things like policy at the highest levels and at the lowest levels for a company commander trying to decide, can I keep my troops from going downtown because there were fights at a bar? So it really is a profession where you have to be incredibly diverse in the advice that you can give and persuasive when you give that advice at all different levels. So that's why I think I loved it. I was never bored.
Well, I can say I myself didn't realize the extent to which you are actually advising other soldiers on personal matters like family law. So it must require an enormous array of legal expertise there under your command. Could you say a little bit about your deployments to Kuwait and Iraq and what the difference was in the role that you played in those deployments?
Yeah, so my first deployment was at the beginning of the Iraq War. And so we were sitting in Kuwait. I was with the 4th Infantry Division out of Fort Hood, Texas. The 4th Infantry Division is a mechanized division, so we have tanks, and we also have aircraft and all of that sort of stuff, helicopters. So while we sat in Kuwait, the 3rd Infantry Division was fighting their way north to Baghdad International Airport. And so what we were doing in Kuwait was preparing our war plan, which was how we were going to array our forces on that battlefield to pick up the fight from Baghdad north to Turkey. And what a lawyer does in that situation is, first of all, we are responsible for the criminal law system. And so you're trying to figure out where troops are in that particular array of battle and who is the person that gives them the orders that then if they disobey them, we can prosecute them. Or if they get in a fight, or if they leave their weapon somewhere, or if they fire and kill someone that they shouldn't have shot. And so we have to make sure that all of those jurisdictional issues are done. It's not like you're in Kansas and therefore the Kansas state prosecutors have you. It's who was your commander at that time. The other thing we did in Kuwait was with those battle plans, making sure that every soldier and the commanders understood the rules of engagement and what force could be used and under what circumstances. And so as we got ready to head off to begin that fight, I flew with our 2-star general division commander to every lead commander out in the field, which were all colonels, which is a high rank, probably been in their early 50s, late 40s. And I sat down with them and reviewed the rules of engagement before they kicked off that battle. Because it's important as Americans that we follow the rules of law and the Geneva Conventions to set that example for others who may be thinking that they're not going to do the same. And you can't get down in the mud with them and violate those laws, because then you have no ability to prosecute them if you have done the same thing. And so we take that very seriously, the US Armed Forces. And so that's what I was doing in Kuwait. Once we were in Iraq, we continued that mission because we had to clear insurgents out of towns. They were no longer wearing uniforms. So then we had to figure out who were really state actors, if I can use that word, and who were criminals, and who were just civilians that happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that's where you have to come up with a system to sort, a sorting hat of some sort that lays them out, who gets protections under the Geneva Conventions, who's just criminals, that you have a criminal process. And so we worked very hard on that. And at the same time, helping the Iraqis set back up their own court systems so that those civilians who had committed crimes were able to actually be tried in their own countries. And so many other things, but I'll stop there.
Wow, that sounds very dynamic, and in a way, I guess you had to be an outstanding analyst at the same time about the situation on the ground.
Yes, it is, and that's one of the reasons why we are soldiers, not just lawyers. Because if we don't understand the weapon systems, and we don't understand the battle plans, and we don't understand the way the tactics work, then we really can't give the advice to the command on the ground. We're not capable of doing that. We have to, we're integrated into the command at the lowest levels in order to be there for the commander, which means that we have to be able to soldier just like anybody else.
Oh, that's remarkable. I wanted to ask you, in terms of the service within the Army Judge Advocate General's office, do you have people who specialize in trial law? In other words, is it sort of a separate branch to be the advocates for defendants in, say, court-martials? How does that work?
What we try to do is, because you just heard that we're, kind of utility players, you have to be able to move from one discipline to another, no matter what level of command you're serving. What we do is start our lawyers out at the lowest level doing different areas of law. And so they'll start out maybe advising young soldiers on personal problems or contracts for cars that they paid way too much interest in for, but things like that at the lowest level. And then we'll move them maybe into criminal trials, which are just like your general crimes, maybe certainly not your more serious crimes, like sexual assault and things along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
But they'll try some of those cases so that they understand giving advice to commanders about discipline. And then they'll try some other things like how to write policy. And so at that low level, we make sure that they have the versatility to spot the issues across the different areas of law. As they move up in ranks, and probably about, I would say, 8 to 10 years in, maybe a little bit before that, they can start to specialize in an area. When they go to the school to get their advanced law degree, it's at that point that they truly can start to specialize. Before that, they can do a primary area, but we make sure they dabble.
Well, from what I understand, you had 10,000 people who you led in this important job you had. And I wonder if you could say something about the configuration of those 10,000 people in light of this. Were they all lawyers, or did you have a combination of administrative staff? And what was the cultural makeup of the Army Judge Advocate's office?
So the Army Judge Advocate General's Corps consists of all three of the components. And I'll explain what I mean by that in the military. And so that means the active component, those that serve every day, get up, put our uniform on, that person. It also includes the reserve component, meaning the U.S. Army Reserve, which are those that are serving in units that on weekends and two weeks a month weeks a year come on to active duty and serve. And then there's the National Guard, which is the element that serves in a state capacity most of the time, and they work for their governors, but they're trained and certified and all that by the active component Army, and then they can be called up for federal service on certain occasions. And so that's the three components, and so the JAGs are in all three of those components. And I supervise all of those and responsible for their training and assignments. When it comes to others, there's of course our enlisted paralegals, and there are a group of them in all three of those components. And then we also have civilians, both civilian attorneys, and we also have civilian paralegals and paraprofessionals. So it's a wide variety of folks. And as the Judge Advocate General by statute, I'm responsible to make sure that they're trained and ready for the fight. And so I'm not only responsible to ensure that their legal training is appropriate and that they get the training that they need. And that includes the jobs to make sure that they're trained to move up. But I'm also responsible to ensure they're trained as soldiers. And so I have to track to make sure they get to all their schooling as soldiers, and that they take all their tests and things like that. So.
Oh, it's remarkable. I've learned a lot from this conversation already. I'm just curious. You had said that Gettysburg College played a big role in the way your career unfolded, and that you look back on it often. And I think this is it's a very moving statement, and something that all of us are really thinking about as we try to find ways to maximize the great gifts of Gettysburg College to its students, especially during these difficult times. Could you say something about what it was like to be at Gettysburg back in the early 80s, and what it was that inspired you to become a lawyer, but then not just any kind of a lawyer, to go into actually to become a soldier? I'm not sure we had ROTC on the campus at that time, did we?
Yes, you did. I was not an ROTC, but you did have ROTC.
Yeah.
So I believed that I wanted to be a lawyer before I came to Gettysburg. I come from an Italian-American family. Darpino is my maiden name. I kept the name to honor my Italian heritage. I married an Irish boy by the name of O'Brien, who was an 83 grad of Gettysburg College. So I thought I wanted to be a corporate lawyer. I had an incredible professor by the name of Ann Fender, who gave me my first exam in my life that I did horrible in. I barely passed. And so I decided, well, gosh darn it, I'm going to be an economics major, because I'm going to show that lady that I can do it. And she inspired me to work hard at something that I really might have thought I wasn't going to be good at. And that was the beginning of, I think, what Gettysburg taught me, was that instead of walking away from the things that are difficult and concentrating on the things that I thought, I was good at, it is best to challenge yourself to be the best that you can be. And that kind of was the foundation, I think, of my Gettysburg experience, and really pushed me to do things outside my comfort zone. And that adaptability that I got there really, I think, paid off, not only when it comes to, moving every 2 years, which you're about 4 years in the Army, depending on your rank, not, being dropped in Iraq where I didn't have any phone or anything like that. And I had to, figure things out on my own with my team, all that adaptability stuff. It helped with all of that, but it helped with life. To not be afraid, and afraid's not the right word, but to not shy away from challenges that other people might do. And I thank Gettysburg for that regularly. I was in a sorority for a period of time. I became an officer. I served on the honor board. I thought that was important because I believed in that honor and integrity. And then also I was a tour guide where, I was forced, I'm an introvert, and I was forced to meet new people and walk them around campus and realize that if I love Gettysburg and I communicate what's important to me to others, that communication and that skill and that ability to speak it really connects, and that's the genuineness and that they talk about when it comes to being a leader. That genuineness, it communicates when you talk about something you truly believe in. And I learned that at Gettysburg by being a tour guide, which sounds odd, but it's true. And so there are things like that that Gettysburg, I think, carry with me as I move forward in life.
Well, that's remarkable. Now, the military piece of it's very interesting. Did you come from a military family? And did you have any particular interest in military affairs before you went into the JAG service?
To be honest, my grandparents all came from Italy. My father's family actually came from Italy to avoid service in the Italian army. So I didn't come from a military background. My father had a deferral from World War II because he was a farmer. After the GI Bill came out, he wanted to get an education. He, came from one of only two in his family ever to graduate from high school. And so he wanted a college degree. So he joined the Army and then promptly got out when he was done his commitment and went to college, but always told us it was the worst experience in his life. Don't ever join the military. So I had no thoughts of becoming in the military. And I met a guy, that guy by O'Brien, name of O'Brien, my junior year in college, who happened to be an ROTC. And when I graduated from law school, it really, as I was getting ready, I should say, I realized I was going to have to take a bar exam everywhere I was stationed. And I thought, well, that just sounds like a bad idea.
Wow.
So I boldly decided that I was going to join the Army myself. I can do this, I said. If I can do law school for 3 years, I can do the Army for 3 years. Oh, my goodness. So I joined the military and followed my husband in. And we both realized that the culture of the Army just matched who we were. It's a values-based organization. The leadership is servant leadership, meaning that you are not the priority. It is how you raise and train those around you, and public service. And so we fell in love with it and just continued to stay till they kicked us out. My husband actually had to retire when I became the Judge Advocate General because he couldn't work for me. And so he lost his job because of me after he brought me into the service. And then, of course, I hit my statutory limit as the Judge Advocate General and had to retire at that point.
I'm sure that many of the people who are participating in our session not only are learning things about the role that the legal community plays in the military, but could you say something too about really the difference in culture between the military and the civilian world? I think this is something that isn't very well understood among civilians.
It's we operate on core values, and I'm not going to run through the Army values, but the two most important values that we hold dear to us are humility and integrity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think all of that comes, I can only speak from the Army point of view, and I am an officer in the Army. So, my father was an enlisted man. But humility really comes from what we do. So as you picture the different services, and this is not a cut on any service, I just is to illustrate the point of what and who the Army is. When you picture the Air Force, just, close your eyes and picture the Air Force, you picture planes. And that's their mission. Their mission is flying, and their pilots are important. And everybody, it's all focused around that plane. When you close your eyes and you think of the Navy, what do you see? You see a ship. And that is their weapon system, and that's critical. And they all work to make that ship go in the right direction. When you picture the Army and you close your eyes, what do you see? You typically see 5 soldiers standing outside a door, shoulder to shoulder, getting ready to enter into a very dangerous situation. And they're a unit, because our weapon system is our soldiers. And because that is our weapon system, we are a culture that believes that our responsibility when it comes to leadership is to make sure that if we go down in battle, that the person whose shoulder was touching us outside that door can pick up immediately and take over after us. And so it is our responsibility to make sure that we leave the organization and the people better than we got them, so that they would be able to carry on without us. Because leadership to us is never about us. It's always about them, our weapon system, the soldiers that we have the privilege to lead. And I think that attitude, and I'm only going to talk about the Army, but that attitude is something that you don't necessarily see in civilian culture. You do in great organizations. And it's not because they're wrong, and it's not because that's what there should be. It's because our mission is different. And your mission drives your culture. And that's where.
Well, thank you. That was a very, very, I think I'll never look at 5 soldiers standing next to each other about to go into a dangerous situation the same way again. I mean, that's a marvelous way of thinking about it. So what does, maybe this is the last question before we open it up to the students, but what does the Army do about training for leadership, and what kind of situations they put soldiers in to test their leadership capabilities?
Yes. So, you have ROTC there at Gettysburg, and they spend a lot of time on leadership as they train their officers. West Point does the same thing. You're graded on your leadership. It isn't just a matter of classes. That's part of what you're graded on. Your evaluations, even while you're in the military, is on leadership. You have what we call 360-degree surveys, which is where all of your subordinates get to fill out, like, a climate, a survey that asks about your leadership ability, and then your boss sits down with you and they discuss it with you. And it's always part of your growth, so that you find what your strengths and your weaknesses are. The very end of my career, after 30 plus years, still had so many weaknesses when it came to being a leader. Because life over life, you get better in some areas, but you take on more responsibility. And so things have to adapt. What worked as a young captain when I supervised 5 isn't the same skill I'm going to use when I'm supervising 10,000. And so we have to continue to change and adapt our leadership skills. And you can never stop learning, not just the subject, but also when it comes to leadership. And so they continue throughout your career. They send you to schools that focus on leadership. And even if you don't have all that, I'm going to stop on what the Army does, and I'm just going to talk about what you can do. I have people call me sometimes and say, I have the worst boss in the world. I have the worst boss. I'm not going to get through this. I don't know how I'm going to survive. And I remind them that, some of my best leadership lessons and what I learned had come from my worst bosses. Because by watching them, I really learned what didn't work. And so you can learn something from every situation you're in, even when you're not the leader, good or bad, if you take the time to think about it and analyze it and decide how you are going to learn from that and adapt it to who you are as a person. I truly believe that.
Did okay, well, maybe I'll save my follow-up question for later. That's terrific. Lauren, would you mind introducing our first question?
Sure, we have a question from Matt. Matt, do you want to turn your video on and start us off? Okay, I can just read his question. He asked if there was a favorite type of law that you like to practice and why.
You know, I truly love being an operational lawyer. And by that, I mean advising commanders in a combat zone. And I know that sounds weird because you would say to yourself, like, why would you ever say that the most dangerous time of your life is also the time that you enjoyed practicing law the most? And it really was because it's what I had trained to do for my entire career. And it's also something where you really had to rely upon your instincts, and you had to draw from your own personal strength to be able to not only give the advice, but to stand up for yourself and for the law when someone was starting to go a little awry, and pull them back into where they should be. And so I found that not only legally challenging, because there were areas of the law for which I did things that there was nothing in any law book that could ever help me. I had to just use my legal analysis and my skill and my team's skill to come up with what is the answer. But it also I had to have the personal strength and the moral courage to advise what was right, even when I was getting pushback. And that was important, that to have that moral courage and to know that I could do it. And that's why I would say operational law, particularly in a deployed environment, is probably the best, the most challenging, and also the most rewarding.
Well, I'm fascinated by the fact that you were in such dangerous places doing a job that's not exactly related to taking real estate or clearing out, clearing out the insurgents or whatever. And we all know from that period, there were some very, very challenging questions around torture. Abu Ghraib sticks in my mind. For those of you who don't know what Abu Ghraib is, that was the name of a prison, I believe. And was it in Baghdad?
It was outside of Baghdad, but yes. Outside
of Baghdad, that's right. And the military forces there that were guarding the jail were cited for, I don't know. I'm sitting here talking to a lawyer, so I've got to be very careful about what they were what they were accused of. There was probably a legal matter, but I'm fascinated by being in a dangerous situation and then dealing with some of the most important incidents that actually even shaped the way the rest of the world looked at America. And, I will leave that to you to explain what that danger feels like. Do you have to summon something special to be out in environments like that, doing a job that is critical to the mission, but not part of the mission itself?
I think I have to summon something different. That when I talk about courage, it really was more the moral courage. I think that you've trained for it long enough, and I'm not saying that you're not, that there isn't an element of fear, but you care so about those around you and the safety of those around you, particularly as a leader, that you spend as much time concerned about them and less time concerned about yourself. I think this is a story I think might help illustrate. First time I was in Iraq, not the second time, which was a more stable environment, but the first time I was in Iraq, we were in an area where, we would have incoming all the time, and you'd go out in your vehicle and, it wasn't dangerous. It was dangerous on the roads. But we were given a mission to try to get a surrender agreement from an organization that was on the U.S. terrorist list, the State Department's terrorist list. And we weren't really sure how that was going to go. And so I went in, and when we were given the mission, let me just do it simply. I went in, we were given the mission, and we were told that we had to do this. We were going to go to their compound. And when they were done briefing the mission, and I was given the task of coming up with the strategy to get the surrender agreement from the organization, they then said, now we're going to discuss the extraction plan. And by that, they meant that these folks were on the terrorist list. The State Department's terrorist list had previously taken U.S. Citizens hostage. And so there was going to be a plan as to how to get us out should they take us hostage. So when I went back to my office to keep the story simple, and we did what we needed to do as a mission, and I got ready to leave, and I looked at my team, I said to them as I left, to my senior officer in the room, please tell my family that I love them. And I walked out the door, and I didn't realize the impact that that had on them. I mean, I was prepared to do the mission no matter what, because it was important that we got those very, very capable fighting force off the battlefield before we entered that sector. At that moment, I was worried that I needed my family to know that if something happened, that I loved them. And I was a leadership failure because I failed to think that the impact that those words would have on my team. And so as I was flying, I was so concerned that I had said that to them as I was leaving, that they would be worried about me, that I wasn't going to come back, and that they would have to tell my family, instead of, that I let them down, because I had previously let them down in the story, which is something different. And so I was more focused on them than I was on myself. And that goes back to the being part of a team in the military. I had a mission to do. I was going to do it. I didn't want to impact my team.
So just to clarify, this is a remarkable story. You were worried that when you said that you love your family and you wanted them to report that that you were showing some pessimism about your own future, and therefore it affected.
If I was worried about it, if I was worried and I said that to them, then I was worried. And now they had a cause to be worried about me.
Right.
And they shouldn't have been worried about me, as I was doing my mission.
Right.
They needed to be doing the daily business of that day, not being worried about me. Even though they would have been, even though we know they would have been, right?
Right. It's a remarkable story, and I hope everybody on this call has really taken this in. This has a lot to do with, one of the critical things that any great officer has, and obviously General Darpino, you have it in spades, which is understanding the impact you have on other people. It's a lot of times we think it's just okay to be emoting all the time, but I'm saying for civilians, but it can have an effect on civilian institutions as well. Yeah, I think that Lauren may have another question for us here.
We do. Sarah, do you want to turn your camera on and ask your question?
Sure. I would like to ask, what has motivated you throughout your career, or in other words, what are some values or ideas that have kept you striving to achieve?
Sarah, that's a tough one for me. One of the great things about being in the military is that they push you into jobs before you think you're ready. You really have you can hold yourself back, and I'm not saying that you can't, but you are pushed into positions before. When I was selected to be the Judge Advocate General, I laid in my bed for 2 days, wide awake, tossing and turning, thinking why on God's earth would they select me? What if I screw this up? And then I'd say to myself, well, you have to have faith that they chose you because they knew you were ready for this, and they knew that you were the best person for the job. And so you have to go into this and make sure that you do your very best and give 100%, because they chose you to do this, and you owe it to them to make sure that you do not fail. And I think that goes back in some way to the way I was raised. So I mentioned being an Italian American. All my grandparents came from Italy, and my parents were World War II generation. And so, as you can imagine, Italians after World War II with Mussolini may not have been a heritage that you wanted to be from in the United States. And like, we moved one place and no one spoke to us for 6 months. We were also Catholic, which in some areas of the country at that time was not necessarily accepted. And so that had something to do with it. So my father kind of raised us and my mother that we had to be better than the people around us in order to be considered equal. That we had to always give 100+% in anything that we did. Because if they ever saw us slacking, they would say, well, there are those Italians. And so I was always raised that no matter what I did, I always had to strive to do my very, very best. And I could never do anything less than that. And so my life was very much, I won't say it had more to do with my heritage than it did my gender. Now, that said, the other overriding personality trait, aside from that, that I think really carried me through was something that Susan just said. And it is a positive attitude. Never underestimate the power of optimism. Going into something, like I said, I was like, well, I'm going to be able to do that. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. They've selected me. I'm going to do this. That positive attitude is not only important for yourself, to steel yourself against hard times, to steel yourself to know that at the end, there's always light at the end of that tunnel, and no, it's not an incoming train. That positive attitude and that optimism is incredibly important. But it's also important as a leader, because they pick up on your the vibe that you send. And if the vibe you send is that you're going to fail and they're going to fail, or we're going to fail, or this sucks, or it's going to rain tomorrow, then they're brought down, and then they don't give 100%, because, well, does it really matter? Does it really matter? And so you not only have to believe in yourself and that you're going to be able to do it, and that you're going to give 100%, and that you can stand up for this. You have to do it because that vibe permeates your organization. That doesn't mean that you don't have to be, that you can just be a Pollyanna. You have to be honest with them. You have to tell them that this sucks. I know it, but we're going to get through this together. And this is how we're going to do it. You have to be honest and truthful, but at the same time, give them the faith in you and in the mission and in the future that makes them continue to march forward. And I don't know if that answered your question, Sarah, but that I think is what gave me the steel in my spine.
Wow, thank you very much for that wonderful answer. Lauren, do we have any other questions?
We do. We have a student who's having some technical problems, so I'm going to read it on her behalf. And I think this is a great follow-up question to what you're just saying. How are you able to prepare yourself while working in a dynamic environment, and how are you able to keep your mental health in check?
Yeah. Okay, so this doesn't just have to do with me being in the Army, because I think my siblings are the same. So I truly believe that one of the key components to mental fitness is physical fitness. And I say that because I believe, and particularly it was true in my profession, if I was physically fit, when they're demanding that, I am on call 24 hours a day in a deployment zone where, I get to sleep until maybe 1 at night, and I was up at maybe 4 and probably woken sometime between 1 and 4 or 5. If I was not physically fit, then my body would let me down and give up, which would mean that my mental ability would then be harmed. And so the more physically fit you remain, you are able to handle life in general, the more your mind is then able to operate, because it's not as exhausted by the physical outlay of what life throws to you. And so I do believe that physical fitness is important component of mental fitness. The other part I found for myself was, and I refer to it as, I would someone who would give myself a good talking to. And I'm not a Southern girl, but I would give myself a good talking to. And so after something happened that either shook me because it was something traumatic or something very stressful, or if it was something that I really thought that I was like, I did a good job there. That was like kind of that was kind of a win. I would make sure that I gave myself a good talking to. And that may be, taking myself for a walk, which is something that I would do. I'm a gardener. And so when I was in Germany, I would often go to the gardens near my house, and I would walk through the gardens. And I would give myself that talking to and say, okay, so Flora, you think you did such a good job, right? You think you did such a good job. Like, what about it you think you did that was good? And what could you have done better? And who really helped you do that? Like, you didn't do that alone. And if it was something traumatic that happened, I'd give myself a good talking to, and I'd say, okay, so like, come on, what went wrong there? Like, what could you have done better? Like, what, and if you were in that situation again, what would you do differently? What lessons can you learn from that? And I think that introspection and conversation with myself, because it came in both scenarios, both good and bad, I felt like I was being an honest broker. And so I was growing. No matter what happened, I was growing and I was learning, and I was taking something from it. And so I think in some ways that strengthened my ability to handle the situation when it came, situation when it came again, because it wasn't something that paralyzed me. It was something that told me that that I could get through it, and then on the other end, I was going to learn something from this. Good or bad, I was going to learn something from this. And so I think that was part of what kept me mentally fit.
Oh, that's such an interesting segue to a question I wanted to ask you about introspection. So it sounds like you do a lot of that introspection while you're out walking, but do you keep a diary, or do you keep extensive notes about things that have occurred to you over time, or are you lucky enough to have one of those memories that absorbs it all and is easy to recall?
I don't keep a diary, and Susan, to be honest, it's because I'm never really sure what's classified and what's not classified, and I don't want to take a chance. Okay, and so I just don't. I do occasionally sit down and do leadership principles, or the kind of the things that I just talked about, like what have I learned, what have I not learned. But that's only been later in life. Mm-hmm. I don't, and I can't explain why. I think it's part of growing as a person, that I think maybe it's more assimilating the lessons to become the person that I want to become. Is what I think I try to achieve through it, not by doing that.
So it sounds like you've gone through a goal setting process for yourself in terms of that growth and just moving in that trajectory. Well, I think you explained it absolutely. Now that I think about it, it's sort of a stupid question on my part, because not only would there be the classification question, but also diaries in your line of work could be required in some kind of a court case, or they could be subpoenaed or whatever the right word is for documents as opposed to people. I don't know, but that's very interesting. So a follow-up question to that is you talk about leadership principles. So, as we're coming into the end of our conversation here, I'm wondering if you could say something about the leadership principles that you think are most foundational, because there are many principles that apply to great leadership. But what would you say are the foundational ones that you have to be in place before we could get on to the rest of it?
I think I've mentioned all of them, interestingly enough. And I do have a group of leadership principles that are, I would say, for mid-grade leaders, there's about 8 or 9 of them. But when it comes to foundational leadership, I honestly believe it is what I've already said, which is humility, integrity, optimism. Right? I truly believe that optimism is a key, a positive attitude, the power of optimism, and then to never stop learning.
Yeah.
I think that those are really the 4 foundational principles for me. Humility and part of, it's what I just talked about, taking myself for a walk. That's part of humility to me, is to make sure I always stay humble. When I have a success, it's not my success. It's never my success. It's our success. And so that humility part is important because it always keeps you in check. So that you're not staring in the mirror at yourself. You're always looking at your organization. If you don't have humility, then, all you see is what validates who you think you are. And so you have to have that humility. And then I think integrity is important because integrity is important. But it's also important because it keeps you grounded. And it's the counterpart of humility. You don't start to believe the great lie about yourself, if you have integrity. And it also helps you evaluate others and not choose the easy right, because you always are looking to do what is right, not choose the easy right when you keep integrity as a watchword. I mentioned already the power of optimism, but I think it's important for your own mental health too. And as a leader, you can't take them down the dark road. Yeah, that's just the wrong answer. It is your responsibility to give them the mission and the hope, and that you're going to achieve it, even if achieving it ends in their own peril. It's that positive attitude. And then lastly, like I said, never stop learning. And that goes back to the other ones. If you become stagnant and you think that you know everything you need to know, not only about your practice of law, your contracts, whatever it is, the law. If you think you know everything you need to know about your organization, that there's nothing out there you don't need to know. More importantly, you think you know everything there is to know about yourself, and you just stop growing.
Yeah.
You just stop growing. Your mind just stops. You accept the status quo. You don't get better. Your organization doesn't get better. Your people don't get better. So those are my 4.
Well, General Darpino, I've got to say that this has really been very inspiring, and I'm just wondering, how you would put it to our participants here about the times in which we're living, and what kind of challenges these students have faced because of the pandemic, because of being isolated. Much of what we've talked about are moments of action, and all of us are so eager to get back to the action of our lives where we feel like we can move forward. So perhaps this would be a great time for you to make some closing remarks about what you'd like to leave with our students, not only about your own remarkable career as Judge Advocate General, but also as a trustee of Gettysburg College, thinking about the challenges facing our students at this point in time.
Yeah, and if ever there was a time for optimism, I think this is that time. You know, when we went into this, you know, we all thought, well, you know, we'll probably, you know, Gettysburg we'll end early. We'll all be back in the fall. This will all be resolved. Things will be back to normal. And we now know that that's not true. And, you know, we can wallow in that. You know, we can concentrate on what we're missing. We can say, you know, I'm not going to get to do this. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. We can do that. I mean, that is absolutely a way to get through this. But it's not a way that you grow through this. It's a survival technique. There's a saying in the military, and I apologize if I say anything that offends anyone. But we have a saying in the military, which is in the Army, I should say, which is embrace the suck. Because so much that we do, you know, involves, you know, look, I didn't take a shower for, I don't know how long, how many, like over a month. I ate MREs for 4 months. They are horrible. They taste yucky. You know, we have this saying, embrace the suck. Like, that's it. This is it. Stop focusing on what's bad and start seeing what you can do to make it better. Like, what can I do? What advantages can I take? Okay, so I'm stuck here in Kuwait with nothing to do, sitting on a cot. It's 1,000 degrees. I'm skipping lunch because I have to walk 2 miles. I'm just gonna, you know, I can sit here or I can embrace the suck and say, you know what? I have not read the last 2 winners of the Pulitzer. But I'm gonna read those. I'm gonna read these novels. I'm gonna, you know, I've always wanted to learn how to. I'm going to do that. And I think that that's what we have to do to get through this. Take advantage of things like this, like JTRM, like you guys are doing now. You could have sat at home. You could have done nothing today. But you know what? Embrace the suck. Go ahead and look for the positive things that you can do to make yourself better as a person. Don't eat the chips. Go for the walk. How can you make yourself a better person? I mean, that's what I think we have to do as we go through this. That's what I've been trying to do as I go through this. I realize I like embroidering, which is weird, but my grandmother did it. I was like, well, let's see how it goes. And so that would be my send off to you. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's really how I've lived my life. And so I tell you, for me, it has worked. It's gotten me to not a perfect place as a person, but I think I'm a better person than I was when I started this journey of adulthood. And I think that I've got a long way to go. And I will continue this journey until my God tells me that it's time for me to end.
Well, thank you. On that very stirring and optimistic note, I really know I can speak for the entire gathering here to tell you what an extraordinary honor it's been to have you on this program. And thank you again for your insights into not only the times we're living in, but also what kind of leadership really matters. So thank you again, General Darpino, and all the best wishes to everybody on this call.
Thank you so much, Susan, and thank you, students, for your attention. And it really has been my honor to be able to speak with you today. I've been looking forward to it, and I'm glad that we were able to do it.
Right. Thank you.